I want to talk about something that I think pretty much everyone watching this has felt at some point. And I'm not talking about anything crazy deep or philosophical. This is just real life stuff that happens to normal people every single day. So imagine this. You're making $50,000 a year. Maybe more, maybe a little less, but let's just say $50,000. And honestly, by most standards in the world, that's decent money. Like, if you told someone that number a few decades ago, they'd think you were doing well. You'd have a roof over your head, food on the table, maybe a car, maybe some savings. Life is okay. Then you wake up one morning, grab your phone before you even get out of bed, which, by the way, we all do, and we all know we shouldn't, and you open Instagram or TikTok or YouTube Shorts, doesn't matter which one, and within like the first 3 minutes, you've already seen someone your age driving a Lamborghini, a 19-year-old showing off her penthouse apartment, some guy flying private to Dubai for the weekend, and a fitness influencer who somehow also runs a 7-figure business and has perfect abs. And you just put your phone down. And something feels off. You can't fully explain it. You haven't even gotten out of bed yet, and you already feel like you're behind. Like you're losing at something. Like your life is somehow not enough. Here's the question I want to dig into today. Why does that happen? Like, what is actually going on in your brain that makes a perfectly decent life feel inadequate after 10 minutes on your phone? Because there's a real answer to that. There's psychology behind it, there's history behind it, and once you understand the mechanism, you start to see it everywhere. And you start to see it for what it actually is. So let's get into it. So the first thing I want to establish is that comparing yourself to other people is not a personal failing. It is not a sign that you're insecure or shallow or materialistic. It's something every single human being does, has always done, and honestly can't fully stop doing because it's baked into the architecture of your brain. And to understand why, you have to go back, way back. Think about what life looked like for early humans. Not like a few hundred years ago. I mean tens of thousands of years ago. Small groups of people, maybe 50 to 150 individuals, living together, hunting together, surviving together. In that kind of environment, knowing where you stood in the group wasn't just about ego. It was survival information. You needed to know who had access to the most food, because that told you who had power and resources. You needed to know who was physically strongest, because that mattered for protection and for hunting. You needed to know your social rank, because in a small tribe, being at the bottom of the hierarchy, being the person nobody respected or valued, could literally get you excluded from the group. And exclusion from the group back then wasn't just embarrassing. It was a death sentence. You could not survive alone. So your brain developed this constant, automatic background process that is always running, always scanning your social environment, always asking, where do I rank? Am I moving up or down? Who has more than me? Who has less? And what does that mean for my position? Now, here's the thing. That system, still running. Today, right now, in your brain, in my brain, in everyone's brain. The software hasn't been updated in thousands of years, and we are now running that same ancient comparison engine in a world that looks absolutely nothing like the environment it was designed for. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a neighbor with a slightly nicer house and a billionaire on a YouTube video. It processes both as social information. It registers both as data points about your relative status. The same circuits fire. The same emotional responses get triggered. The same feelings of inadequacy. The same subtle anxiety. The same pressure to do more, be more, get more. You didn't choose to feel that way. Your brain chose it for you before you were even conscious of what was happening. That's how deep this thing runs. And this is actually really important to understand before we go any further, because a lot of people beat themselves up for feeling this way. They think something is wrong with them. They think they're just not grateful enough, or they're too materialistic, or they need to work on their mindset. And while mindset stuff is real, and we'll get to that, The starting point is just recognizing that this is a human thing. It's not a you thing. Every person who has ever lived has dealt with some version of this. The question is just what happens when you pour rocket fuel on an ancient instinct? And that's where social media comes in. Okay, so let's fast forward from ancient tribal life to 1950. Average person in 1950, what's their social world look like? They've got their family, their neighbors on the street, maybe a few hundred coworkers or people from their town that they interact with over the course of a lifetime. Their reference group, the people they're comparing themselves to, is small, local, and relatively similar to them in terms of wealth and lifestyle. If your neighbor got a new car, yeah, maybe you felt a little something. That's where the phrase keeping up with the Joneses comes from. But the Joneses were just regular people, middle-class people with regular jobs. The gap between you and the richest person you personally knew was probably not that extreme. Now, jump to today. You wake up and before breakfast, your brain has been exposed to the lifestyles of people in the top 0.001% of global wealth. Not through some special effort or circumstance, just from picking up your phone. Just from existing in the modern world with an internet connection. Instagram was designed intentionally by engineers and psychologists to show you the most aspirational, curated, impressive content possible. Because that's what gets engagement. TikTok's algorithm is literally optimized to show you stuff that provokes a strong emotional reaction. Luxury content, status content, wealth content, it performs incredibly well because human brains are wired to pay attention to it. So you've got this ancient comparison system that evolved to process a social world of 150 people, and now it's being fed a non-stop stream of highlight reels from millions of people across the entire planet, specifically filtered to show you the most successful, the most beautiful, the most wealthy among all of them. The math on that is brutal, genuinely brutal. Because here's what your brain doesn't do when you're scrolling. It doesn't add the disclaimer, hey, this is a curated highlight reel from someone whose full-time job is making their life look good on camera. It doesn't remind you that the influencer in the Lamborghini might be renting it for the day. It doesn't note that the guy talking about his 7-figure business might have 7 figures in debt. It just takes the input and processes it like it's accurate social information about someone in your tribe. So now your tribe is no longer 150 people from your town. Your tribe, as far as your brain is concerned, is every aspirational person you've ever seen on social media. And you're measuring yourself against the combined highlight reel of all of them. Nobody wins that comparison. Not even the richest people on the platform, because there's always someone richer. But we'll get to that. The other thing that makes social media uniquely damaging here is the speed of it. In the past, if you felt inadequate about something, there was natural space for that feeling to pass. You'd go about your day, you'd interact with real people, you'd get perspective. Now, you can feel inadequate at 7 a.m., reach for your phone to distract yourself from that feeling, and accidentally expose yourself to more content that makes the feeling worse. The scroll is both the trigger and the coping mechanism, which is a particularly nasty trap that I think a lot of people recognize in themselves, but have a really hard time actually breaking out of. And again, this isn't weakness. This is by design. The platforms are engineered to keep you there. The comparison instinct keeps you engaged. It's almost like someone built a machine specifically calibrated to exploit the most ancient parts of your psychology. Because it kinda did. All right, so now let's talk about something that I think explains a lot about why this problem never seems to resolve itself, even for people who know about it, even for people who are actively trying to be more grateful and present and all of that. It's called the hedonic treadmill, and it's one of the most well-documented phenomena in psychology. Here's the basic idea. Human beings are remarkably good at adapting to new circumstances. Whatever your current situation is, good or bad, you eventually adapt to it, and it becomes your new normal. And then you want the next thing. Let me give you some examples, because this plays out in really specific, recognizable ways. You want a new phone. You've been eyeing it for months. You finally get it, and for the first week or two, every time you pick it up, you get this little hit of satisfaction. It feels premium, it feels good, you're happy you got it. 3 weeks later, it's just your phone. You don't think about it. It's normal. Then you see someone with the newer model, or a different brand you hadn't considered, and suddenly your phone, the same phone you saved up for and were excited about, feels kind of outdated. Same thing happens with apartments, with cars, with salaries, with literally almost every material thing you can acquire. There was a study done, and this one really stuck with me, that looked at lottery winners and people who would become paraplegic from accidents. They tracked happiness levels in both groups over time. And what they found is that within about a year, both groups had largely returned to roughly the same baseline happiness they had before their life-changing event. The lottery winners were not dramatically happier. The accident survivors were not dramatically less happy. Both had adapted to their new circumstances. Now, obviously, that's a study with a lot of nuance and limitations, but the core finding that humans adapt to changed circumstances and return toward a happiness baseline has been replicated over and over in different forms. What it means in practical terms is that getting more doesn't actually solve the feeling of wanting more. It just raises the floor. Now, your new baseline requires more to feel like enough. The treadmill speeds up. And here's where this intersects so directly with comparison culture. Because when you're on a treadmill and you're looking at people ahead of you on a faster treadmill, you don't think, I'm on a treadmill, they're on a treadmill, we're all just running and none of us are getting anywhere that actually matters. You think they're winning and I'm losing. The comparison doesn't happen at the level of baselines. It happens at the level of the last thing you acquired versus the last thing they acquired. And because social media is constantly refreshing with new content, the comparison is also constantly refreshing. There's no moment where you've caught up. There's always a new benchmark being set. This is also why so many people who achieve significant financial success report still feeling a nagging sense of not having enough. Not because they're broken people, because the treadmill is a feature of human psychology, not a bug that success fixes. You adapt, you want more, someone shows up who has more, the comparison resets. Understanding this doesn't make the feeling go away, but it does make it make sense. And when something makes sense, you at least have a shot at choosing how to respond to it rather than just being dragged along by it. Okay, so here's something interesting that I think is worth digging into. Because we've been talking about comparison and how it makes people feel inadequate, but there's another side to this that's a little more complicated. Why are people so fascinated with rich people in the first place? Like, think about the numbers on certain types of content. Luxury house tours, car collection videos. I spent a day living like a billionaire content. These videos get tens of millions of views. The comments are full of people who know they will never own a $40 million house, know they can't afford a Bugatti, and are watching anyway. They keep watching. They come back. Why? The answer goes back to the same evolutionary wiring we talked about earlier, but from a slightly different angle. In the tribe, paying attention to high-status individuals was genuinely useful. Those were the people whose decisions affected the group. Those were the people with access to resources. Watching them, learning their patterns, understanding how they operated, that was valuable information. Status in the ancient world was built on a mix of things. Strength, wisdom, reputation, social connections. But in almost every human society, control of resources was a central component. And in the modern world, money is the most universal and legible signal of resource control. So when your brain sees someone with extreme wealth, it registers them as a high-status individual, and it becomes interested, attentive, almost compulsively so. That's not admiration, necessarily. It's not even envy, necessarily. It's an ancient attentional reflex that says this person matters. Pay attention to them. That's why these videos work even for people who actively dislike wealthy people or wealthy culture. Even the people in the comments saying, "This is disgusting, no one needs this much money," watch the whole video. The tribal brain doesn't really distinguish between positive and negative engagement. It just wants to know about the high-status individual. There's also this element of parasocial aspiration. When you watch that content enough, some part of your brain files it under things that are possible. You may rationally know that you're unlikely to have a private jet, but some portion of your brain is taking notes. It's observing the habits, the speech patterns, the aesthetic choices, the lifestyle markers. Because in the ancestral environment, watching successful people and learning from them was a legitimate path to improving your own position. Which is why self-improvement content and wealth content have always been intertwined. They're speaking to the same part of the brain that says, if I study this person, maybe some of what they have becomes available to me. There's nothing wrong with that as a drive. It can be extremely productive when it's aimed at the right things. The problem is when the watching becomes the thing instead of the doing. When you get the emotional experience of proximity to success through content consumption without any of the actual work. That's where it starts to curdle into something that just makes you feel worse over time. And social media has gotten very good at giving you that feeling. The thumbnail of a Lamborghini, the opening shot of a mansion, the watch collection laid out on a table. These trigger the status attention reflex instantly. And the platforms know it, so they serve it to you constantly. And your ancient tribal brain keeps clicking, keeps watching, keeps processing it as relevant survival information. Even though you're lying on your couch, perfectly safe, not in any tribe, not competing for any resources that depend on what this person has. So here's where I want to land this whole thing. Because I think everything we've talked about leads to this one point, and it's the most important one. The trap isn't comparison itself. Comparison's just a tool your brain uses. The trap is using other people's wealth as the scoreboard for your own life. And the reason that's a trap, not just a flawed strategy, but a genuine trap, is that by design, by the mathematical reality of how wealth is distributed, there will always be someone richer than you. Always. If you make $40,000 a year and you're comparing yourself to someone who makes $200,000, okay, maybe you think, if I just got to $200,000, I'd feel good. But the person at $200,000 is looking at the person making $2 million. And the person at $2 million is watching the guy with $20 million. And the guy with $20 million is at the dinner table with someone worth $200 million and feeling inadequate about his portfolio. I'm not making this up or exaggerating for effect. There's actual research on this. Studies that surveyed high net worth individuals, people worth millions, about how financially satisfied they were. And a significant portion of them, across wealth levels, reported feeling like they needed roughly 2 to 3 times what they currently had to feel financially secure. The number kept moving. At every level of the wealth distribution, people are looking up. The comparison mechanism doesn't stop working when you hit a certain number. It just recalibrates. Because there's always a new reference group, a new benchmark, a new person whose life makes yours feel like it's missing something. This is why you can look at extremely successful people who have objectively achieved remarkable things, and find that many of them are anxious, driven by a nagging sense of insufficiency, unable to fully enjoy what they've built. Because they're on the same treadmill the rest of us are on. They're just on a more expensive version of it. And the platforms and the culture and the economy are all extremely incentivized to keep you playing that game. Because someone who feels like they don't have enough buys things, clicks things, engages with content, chases status symbols. Someone who feels genuinely content is a lot less profitable to a lot of powerful interests. So, what do you do with that? Honestly, I don't think there's a clean answer. I don't think you can just turn off the comparison instinct. It's too deep. What you can do is become aware of what's happening when it fires. Recognize it as an ancient mechanism responding to a modern stimulus. And then make a deliberate choice about what scoreboard you actually want to use. Am I doing better than I was a year ago? Am I building towards something I actually care about? Am I spending my time and money on things that genuinely improve my daily experience? Or am I chasing status markers because my tribal brain is confused about what decade it's living in? Those are questions that have real answers. Answers you can actually act on. Unlike, am I richer than someone who has more than me? Which is a question with a predetermined answer that you can do nothing about. And here's the last thing I'll leave you with, because I think it reframes all of this in a way that's kind of useful. The same people you're looking at on social media, the ones with the cars, the watches, the houses, the trips, a lot of them feel exactly what you feel. Not about you specifically, but about someone else above them. The game they're playing produces the same anxiety, the same restlessness, the same sense of running and not getting anywhere, just at a different price point. This isn't me saying rich people have it bad or that money doesn't matter. Money matters. Financial security is real and important, and it genuinely does improve quality of life, up to a point. I'm not doing the thing where I pretend money is meaningless. I'm just saying that the feeling of enough, the actual experience of sufficiency, of being okay with where you are, that doesn't come from hitting a number. It comes from deciding what you're measuring. And that decision is available to you right now, regardless of what's in your bank account. Most people never make that decision. They just let the algorithm make it for them. And the algorithm, by design, will always be showing you someone who has more. The only way out of that loop is to consciously opt out of the scoreboard it's running. Not permanently, not perfectly, but enough to remember that your life is being evaluated against a metric that someone else chose, on behalf of an industry that profits from your dissatisfaction. Once you see it that way, you at least get to choose. Anyway, that's what I've got for today. If any of this hit different or you want to push back on something, drop it in the comments. I actually read them. And I'll see you in the next one.